Hello and welcome to part 4 of our 5-part series around 5 conversations, the key to transforming trust, engagement and performance at work. Great to have you with us today, either virtually, online, or if you're viewing this recording offline. So I'm Andy Dent. I'm the Director of Solutions Innovation and People here at the Oxford Group, and I've got the pleasure of leading a team of people that are charged really with serving up innovative solutions and added value to our clients. I'm also joined by my fabulous colleague, Maggie. So over to you.
Thank you very much. You've not introduced me as fabulous before, Andy, but that's nice. So I'm Maggie Matthews, Associate Director here at the Oxford Group. And one of my primary parts of my role is to connect with clients. So the solutions that we have, matching those to some of the challenges our clients have. Yeah, again, as usual, Andy, if anybody's joined this before, you'll know how much I love 5 conversations and love these sessions together. So I'm really excited to share conversation 4.
Fabulous. And just a little bit about us. So the Oxford Group really do all things management, leadership and coaching for organisations all around the world. So let's get into today's topic, because today's topic is all about challenging unhelpful behaviour. The one that we lose a bit of sleep, or some people lose a bit of sleep on. Certainly I know I have done myself in the past as well. So let's have a look at challenging unhelpful behaviour. Why is it important that we go there? What's your thoughts, Maggie?
So I was thinking about this one, as I do ahead of these sessions, Andy, and I think for one of the things I was thinking about for conversation 4, all of the other conversations are sort of ones that we kind of forget to do sometimes. So we don't naturally think they're helpful: building trust, setting expectations, share some of the other ones. But this one here is the one that we probably actively avoid sometimes, because it's the one that we have somehow built up in our minds as being a difficult or negative conversation. But it is important, and it's important for a range of reasons. For me, it's one of the key development tools I see. Giving great feedback, telling people when they're doing stuff well is really important. But also this picking up, noticing when somebody's behavior is unhelpful or is not helping them achieve a task is really key to their development. So for me, that's one of the big sort of the overarching piece about why this is important.
Yeah, absolutely. It really chimes with me. I think this conversation, dare I say, more than any of the others, if you go there, it really shows that you care. It's about caring personally enough about that individual to do something that's probably counterintuitive and might be a bit uncomfortable for you. So you're caring enough about them to give them the feedback, to help them, and the insight to help them step forward, improve, drive their performance forward.
Yeah.
And that involves challenging it a little bit, hitting it head on, challenging directly, which can be uncomfortable. Just a shout out, that's a slight segue, but there's a great book by Kim Scott called Radical Candor, which talks about the kind of the box of radical candor is about caring personally but challenging directly, rather than just trying to avoid the issue, which is not helpful for you or anyone else.
Yeah, and I think counterintuitively as well, we sometimes we know the value of building trust, and I think this one conversation, when it's done well and when it's reciprocated. So I mean, typically we talk about these in a line manager and team member situation, but it's equally powerful, and all of these conversations are equally powerful when we're dealing with stakeholders, internal, external, wherever. But if we get this one right, and if people can see that we actually genuinely care, and we care enough to go that extra mile to share feedback about what we observe, and we do that in a way that's respectful, that's building and growing, it really can deepen trust. I've seen it for myself. I've seen it's deepened trust with peers, and it also deepens trust with team members. So it's powerful for that reason, alongside some of the others that you've shared.
Yeah, absolutely. I think the biggest risk is by not doing it, then potentially run the risk of it becoming a bigger issue and seeping into other members of the team. We've all seen it, haven't we? When there's something in the team that isn't being challenged, that everybody else ends up getting frustrated about, and the team kind of breaks down for that reason, or performance is hampered. We just can't get things moving because people can't get beyond that, or there's seen to be this unfairness. Oh, they get away with that, but actually we can't get away with that. Or we're working really hard, but their lack of effort isn't being challenged. So there's that risk of, if it's not done, it can cause much bigger issues further down the track.
Yeah, and I also see this one as a sort of it brings clarity. It brings into focus. Actually, I'm thinking about focusing when we set expectations and when we set performance objectives at the start of the year. They're not always brilliantly clear, especially the behavioural ones. However, through having this conversation 4, we really can get that clarity and understanding around what's expected from a team member. Again, in a line manager situation, but also in other situations. So I think it really helps to bring that clarity around expectation, because you are sharing feedback, and it can be two-way. And in fact, the way we present conversation 4, I know, Andy, you're about to share the theory behind it. It's about a conversation. It's not a one-way street. It's a conversation. Shall we move into that, Andy?
Let's delve into it, Maggie. So here we go. So conversation 4, challenging unhelpful behaviour. It's rooted in what's called non-violent communication, which was developed by a chap called Marshall Rosenberg, who did some phenomenal work in some really high conflict situations. And essentially, it's a mediation tool for getting people to understand one another. And it's supported by 3 core pillars. The first one is self-knowing. So this is an awareness of your inner feelings. And I see this as an awareness of your inner feelings in 2 ways. One, how are you feeling about stepping into that conversation? And being aware of that and being conscious in terms of how you control your emotions and potentially still go and have the conversation, that's really important to go and have. The second piece is, and you'll see when we go through the model, is understanding how this behavior makes you feel, and being able to name that feeling is really, really important, so we can connect on a human to human level with the other person. Now, all of these things are two-way. I should have said that at the start, really. So it's important for me to be able to name my feelings, is to be giving the other person some space to be able to name how they're feeling, or start to explain and talk that through. So all of these pillars are about a two-way understanding. So obviously empathy is about stepping into that other person's space and about understanding, well, I saw this, but what was going on for you in that moment? Because very often I found these conversations have been quite creative, because what I've thought has been going on in a lot of cases hasn't been as I had imagined it. And there were some reasons, and some genuine reasons, and sometimes some ungenuine reasons, which obviously you've got to tackle in a different way. But very often there's been things that I haven't thought about, with some small tweaks that actually could increase performance from both sides. So empathy is really important. And the last thing is about being straightforward. So this is about you expressing what needs to happen moving forward in terms of really positive, concrete changes to behavior to avoid this happening again. But you also need to be open to the fact that you want the other person to be quite straightforward as well, and for them to share anything that they may need from you moving forward, which is always a really difficult thing to do. And I know, having been on the receiving end of this, sometimes that inner chimp will jump out and react, and you've got to hold that back, because this is really important to create that space and really take things on board to try and move things forward, because this conversation is about shifting performance, not shutting people down, as you'll see as we get into the model that drives it. So here we go. So this is the model. So the first thing, and it's not dissimilar to other feedback models that you've probably seen. In fact, I remember back in my health club general manager days. When I was at Virgin Active, we had a very similar feedback model. The difference with it, in fact, we even had pads of paper that you could write down your feedback in a specific model. The difference between this and the model that I used at the time, the model I used was one way. So it didn't create that dialogue. So the first thing is, what were the clean observations that you saw? What was actually happening without attaching any judgment or your beliefs about what was going on? It's the actual concrete things that happen. You were late for a meeting. The meeting was due to start at 9, and you arrived at 9:15, for example, would be a clear observation. The next thing is about you then sharing how that makes you feel, which can feel a little bit different. And sometimes you've got to put a bit of thought to that. Well, how did that make me feel? And there is a feeling and needs inventory. If you go on the Nonviolent Communication website, you can get a whole list of feelings and needs that will help you go through this flow. So it could be things like, it made me feel disappointed, it made me feel upset, it made me feel angry, it made me feel uncertain. Whatever the feeling is for you, as long as it's authentic, then you can own that. Then what we do is chuck the ball over to the other side, because we want to understand what was going on for that person. So in that moment, what were you observing and what were you feeling? And we create the space for that person to have their say, and we try and lower our walls so we can let in all of that clean, hopefully the clean data, rather than maybe some of the non-clean stuff that might come out at that point. So this is where we've got to be really open-minded and truly tune in to what's going on for the other person. Then what we need to do is to name the needs. And the needs could be, well, listen, I hear you, and thanks for sharing all of that. That made me think differently, but I've got a need in this situation for collaboration, for respect, for understanding. Whatever it may be, you need to be able to name that need. And then we're going to ask the other person, in a similar scenario, what do you need? Because that might help us think about a better way that we could stop this from escalating in the future. And then what we do after that is we flow to the request. And this is where we're very concrete around. So having heard all of that, and that was really useful, I now need to make sure that stepping forward, that this is the action that we see, or however you want to position it. And then lastly, we also chuck the ball over to the other person. So what do you need from me to make sure that this doesn't happen again, or however you want to phrase it? So you can see we've got this really artful two-way communication and dialogue going on, which if we can hold back the inner chimp and really listen and tune in, then we stand a great chance of gaining much more insight than maybe we had before the conversation. So that is the structure of conversation 4 for challenging unhelpful behaviour. We are now going to do, we're not going to do a live acted out scenario, and Maggie and I probably would have tackled things head on if we had anything to talk through that was unhelpful. So we're going to have a bit of a narrative, aren't we, Maggie?
Yeah, we decided against I guess having that conversation really in the open forum, although we tend to, as you said, tackle stuff head on as we work together anyway. So yeah, let's do a demonstration of what it could look like.
Fine. So
based on a real one.
Yeah, I'll paint the picture, Maggie, and then what you can do is play what might have been going on.
Yeah.
On the other side. So the scenario is this. I had a team meeting yesterday, and one of my colleagues, we're going to call them Charlie for now, Charlie was on their phone 3 or 4 times. It was observed the phone came out and they were scrolling through something. They also, on 2 occasions when their colleagues were talking, they cut them off mid-sentence, and they leaned in and they talked over them, they raised their voice, and they didn't stop talking and didn't let other people into the conversation. So that's broadly the scenario that we were dealing with. So let's say I've got a one-to-one with Charlie later that day or the next day, and I kick off the conversation by saying, Charlie, I just wanted to chat through the team meeting yesterday. I noticed on probably 2 or 3 occasions you had your phone out and you were scrolling through something on your phone. I also noticed that you, on 2 separate occasions, cut 2 different colleagues off when they were mid-sentence. You leaned forward, you raised your voice, and you talked for 2 or 3 minutes without letting anybody engage in anything else. That made me just feel just a tiny bit uncomfortable. And it made me feel a little bit sad for those individuals who you'd cut off, who clearly had something to say, but weren't able to finish what they had to say. What was going on for you? So Maggie, what do you think might have been going on for Charlie?
Yeah, so I guess thinking about Charlie, there's a myriad of things that could be going on. Anything from having you imagine he's on the phone, perhaps there's something that they're doing, there's a family situation arising that they need to handle. It could be, it could even be impatience, boredom. Maybe the meeting is not ticking the boxes for them. Maybe they don't know clearly what's going on. So there's probably a myriad of reasons, and we're always careful on this conversation forum and on this model to. I always remember the phrase "tough on the facts, open-minded on the reasons," because why ever or whatever, of course, this stuff goes on that causes behavior, but it doesn't stop the behavior having a negative impact on others, and that's the bit that we want to explore, and that's the bit that we that we need to look at. So yeah, so there's I guess Charlie could present you with a number of reasons.
Well, let's run with those 2. So let's say Charlie's got something going on at home and is a little bit bored. Charlie's one of those people that really wants to kind of action orientated, wants to be doing things, is thinking about what they could be doing outside of that meeting, and doesn't feel it's as a productive use of time. So Charlie's chucked all of that our way, and now we've got to do something with it. So we're going to respectfully acknowledge Charlie and take all that on board and thank them. That's really good. I hadn't understood that, so that's really useful for me to get that understanding from you. So in that particular scenario, Charlie, I've got a need to make sure those meetings are a collaborative space where we all feel that we can bring our thoughts, feelings, perspectives forward, and that everybody is given the space and the respect to be listened to. So I hear you about some of your points, but those are the fundamental needs that I've got within that forum, and I know other colleagues do as well. What about you, Charlie? Let's think about that meeting and that scenario, because we have these team meetings every week. They're not going to go away. So what need have you got within those meetings? So
okay, so I guess not being Charlie, but Charlie there may be a need for structure and agenda for Charlie to sort of know where they are on the journey, particularly if Charlie's is action orientated and it's a meeting that's exploring options or that's brainstorming. There might be a level of impatience on there, so possibly a need for structure and for clarity about where we are on an agenda.
Okay, so let's take that forward then. So Charlie needs more structure and needs the meeting to be moving at a pace, and maybe things not being dwelled on too much within that. So thanks, Charlie. I take that on board, and what I'll do for the next meeting, I'll make sure we've got a slightly more structured agenda, and also what I'll do is I'll make sure that there's relevant space for people to come in. So, and I know that you're really keen to get your view across, but do me a favor, if you've got something you need and want to push across and someone else is speaking, just literally give me the nod, get my attention, and I'll make sure that I bring you in and say, Charlie, I think you might have a view on this. So I'll make sure I do that for the next meeting. Let's see how that goes. But listen, I've got a request from you to make sure that this doesn't happen moving forward. So firstly, the phone. We need to make sure that, the phone is either not in that room, or if it is in that room, it's not visible. One, so that you're not tempted to be distracted by it. If you've got something going on outside of work, let me know, and that meeting might not be the right place for you to be at that point, and that's fine. We can make arrangements. It doesn't matter if you miss, the odd one here and there. But if you are in the meeting, then phone needs to be away. Also, the biggest thing for me is that respect piece. So making sure that when colleagues are talking, wait till they've finished, and then you can jump in, and you'll be received better for that as well. They'll feel more listened, and you'll probably be heard better as well. What about for you, Charlie? What are your things that you need from me to make sure that this really lands moving forward, and we're not in this situation again?
Okay, and I'm not Charlie. However, I guess Charlie may talk about the request for a structured meeting, and actually the permission to, if there is a lot of stuff happening in Charlie's life at the moment, the permission to not be in the meeting, if there is something in that particular moment, may be a request that Charlie could make. That I guess as a manager you've got to figure out the appropriateness of that or not.
Yeah. And I generally find by the time, if you've really tuned in and listened, by the time you've got to their requests, if you are tuned in and listening, you've probably covered off most of the things that they're going to need anyway. On occasions, there might be something that you haven't thought about. I think, actually, do you know what? That's quite a good idea, and that's an easy fix.
Yeah. And I guess the bit this whole conversation, Andy, and it's difficult in our little scenario, but is authenticity, and it's back to the slides that we've seen before, and back to conversation 1 and back to conversation 2. If you've built trust, if you've set expectations, these conversations are easier to have, and you're starting to demonstrate your commitment to an individual's development through having the conversation.
Absolutely. And I'm just going to put my realist hat on, because I've been in a number of situations where I've stepped into conversations like these, and you will have had these, Maggie, also, where you just know it's not going in and the person's not playing ball. And we've just talked through the scenario of Charlie, which was easy because there's no Charlie and we've come up with how we respond. But sometimes you get those people that no matter what you say, they don't play ball, and they're just not taking on board what you said. And in that situation, you can only do your best. I think there's only a certain point that you can go to, and that is at the point then where you might just need to go one way and make it clear to them, and make sure it's documented, so that if you need to revisit this, you've got a clear trail of what you've shared with that individual and what they needed to improve upon, and making sure that it's very specific so that we can be measured in the future. Because ultimately we want performance to improve, but sometimes we all know that it doesn't, and that's a different conversation at that point.
Yeah, and in actual fact, it may not be one conversation either. It's something that could happen over a series of conversations, and I think it's that making it two-way, inviting the other person in. That one of the things I like about this is you're sharing my observations, I'm sharing how I feel, and then I'm checking out immediately and getting the same back. So it is a dialogue, and that's part of its power.
Yeah, absolutely. Real adult to adult dialogue about how we can shift this forward together. So, I mean, that we've shared all the positives there, haven't we? But so why do people not have these conversations more often? And this is particularly the one that we spend a bit of time on in delivery of the program. So what's your thoughts, Maggie? What stops people?
Yeah, I mean, gosh, the biggest one, when I talk to managers in sort of in the training room, or when I'm talking to HR people who've got an ear with managers, there's a few different factors that influence. Generally, at the root of it is this sort of fight or flight. So it's the inbuilt fear, and I know this is an element in neuroscience, Andy, that you sort of talk about, that fight or flight. It's what happens internally within us. So that's there, and that I think can be the root for many of the other reasons why we're not having it. I often hear people say it's not a big deal. We convince ourselves that what I've seen or what I've heard is not a big deal, so I'll ignore it. Because it's only a one-off, and then they've done it again, but it was 3 weeks ago when they did it last, and it was so we build a story, and then soon something that was small has become something significant, and we didn't tackle it in the first place, and now it's become a consistent behavior, and it's never tackled. So that's one of the reasons I've observed over time.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that kind of fear of being uncomfortable becomes overbearing, that we kind of convince ourselves we can get away with not doing. I know I've, full disclosure, I've gone into
Me too.
meetings with people thinking, right, I'm going to have this difficult conversation, and I've left the meeting think, what? How did I not end up having that conversation? I was all geared up for it, I prepared, and I just completely avoided it. And that is the fight and flight kicking in. It's like, yeah, don't go there, don't ruin the relationship. But as you say, very often it doesn't help longer term.
Yeah.
And I think also we sometimes fear like the hostile reaction coming back from the other person. That's something that can.
That's yeah, I think that one's it. And I guess part of the five conversations program, and when we take people through, is the mindset piece. And back to the very beginning of our session, it's why the reminding ourselves, why is this important to have, why is it important that I have this conversation, and reminding ourselves of that, and the reasons around it's developing others, it's improving performance, it's going to have an impact on engagement of that individual, hopefully, but also of the team around them. So
Yeah.
it's that it's for all of these reasons here why we don't have it. Actually, there is a convincer about why it's important to have it.
Yeah, no, I completely agree, and we could talk about this forever, but
We could.
easily. I suppose the biggest thing is that fear of damaging the relationship. But if we do really care personally, then that frame is going to be more powerful than the fear of damaging the relationship, because
Yeah.
actually it could damage the person's performance, not just now, but for the rest of their career. So by putting that lens on things as you step into it, that with that intent to really help, I think that's something that can make a big difference in the way that these conversations roll out and turn out.
Yeah. And I guess there are times when you can leave it, when it isn't a big deal, genuinely. So you've got somebody who's consistently performing, they do something which is a bit off one day. It hasn't had any major damage or impact. It's worth stepping back and observing and noticing, and not having to call out everything every time,
Yeah,
because that too is potentially frustrating for people. It's not,
yeah.
it's not a hammer. We don't want to use a hammer to
No,
crack a nut.
absolutely, absolutely. And I think just in that scenario, just going in with the first part of that conversation, which is, look, I noticed in the meeting yesterday this happened. What was going on for you? You don't necessarily need to go any further, but it might just bring out some understanding, and it might be useful for that other person as well.
Yeah.
Anyway, we are almost out of time, and as we
Mm-hmm.
said, we could go on forever, and we nearly did then, Maggie, but we won't.
We
So
did.
let's shift forward. So if you do want to learn a little bit more about what we do here at the Oxford Group, you can dive onto our website and take a look. You can follow us on social media for other events that we're doing. You can by all means pick up a copy of the book on Amazon or any best-selling, do they say, book stores.
Yeah.
Or you can sign up to our newsletter as well, so you can hear about anything else related to Five Conversations or other programs that we run. But for now, thank you so much for joining us. Please join us for a conversation 5, or if you're viewing this offline on video, you'll better jump to the next episode straight away. Thank you, everyone, and
Thank you.
take care.